will explain how to implement a government design system in Plone 6, explaining the New South Wales government case study. Thank you.
Hello, you want to say?
No.
Oh, okay. So my name's Dylan J. I am the CTO founder, one of the founders of Predagov. This is Jeff Bledsoe, who is a front-end developer.
Yep.
But we're all a bit all around within our company. So, and what we're going to do is Jeff will, he's going to deal with the technical parts, and I'm going to talk about the UX and some of these sort of ideas. And what this talk is about is, I think we decided last night, it's really about bringing your own HTML. This is the big sort of thing that we're talking about. This is like a theming experience when you are forced to use someone else's HTML. And okay, so a little bit about Predagov. If you don't know, we have been around a long time. I should know the date. I don't know. Sometimes in the 2000s. So we had, oh, there we go, 18 years of experience. There you go. Our markets are mainly UK, Australia, and some European clients. I forgot, we do have some Thai clients, so I didn't include that. Right, so the first thing I think I wanted to get across is you've heard design systems talked about in a few other slides, and I think it's not something that's been explained kind of well, so I want to go over that a little bit in case you're unfamiliar. How many people have a good understanding? I think they know what a design system is? Okay. Okay, cool. Not that many. Okay. So I think the best example that most people might know would be material design. If you've know anything about mobile development, this is the design system that Google puts out in order that you will make an app that looks like another Android app. And the things that are in a design system are, this site is really cool, by the way. It's called Component Gallery. So it has lots and lots of design systems. But you have a design system, could be Figma, it could be just the design. It's generally not. Generally, it'll come with HTML, CSS. Often it comes with a dynamic implementation like React or Vue or something. But it's much more than that. It also includes, you can see here, they talk about user voice, so how your content should sound. It can come with guidance about how you should and shouldn't use the components. That is what a design system is. It is much more than just a bunch of components. So Pastanaga is a design system. That's the design system that is used in Volto to create the Volto editing UI. Quanta, the future UX for Volto, is a design system. So components are a very important part of design systems. So this is an example from Component Gallery where you can see what a card is, and then you can see all the examples of the different cards from the different design systems, which is quite cool. So I did look up a definition of a design system. That's not very useful, but generally, I think for us as Plone people, it's a theme in a way, right? But it's a theme normally designed for distributed teams where you have lots of different people within a large organization that need to collaborate, need to end up with a consistent user experience. So it makes sense for, you saw Decathlon before and big organizations, but governments especially, because they have lots and lots of websites, lots of people building them, and they should all look the same. The customer experience should look the same. So yeah, distributed teams and enhancing branding is one thing. The consistent UX I think I talked about, and also that content voice thing about like not just looking and feeling the same, but also sounding the same. And also the accessibility, particularly with the government stuff. So what we get by inheriting this government design system is that's already been accessibility tested. You use the word tested? I don't know.
Yeah, tested.
Tested? Yeah. So I guess I've already answered why design systems are good. We work with both the UK government and the Australian government. So the UK government, I think, came out with their design system first. Both governments are kind of working in a very similar way. And you can see they say exactly that, right? It's all about having this consistent user experience. So I think this is an example from the New South Wales design system documentation. And I think this really highlights what I'm saying here is that it's about guidance, not just, oh, here's a component, right? It's saying you should use this in these things, right? Like, so cards should, what do I say? Like, you know, it should have one piece of information. If you've got multiple links, if you are trying to say too many things, then use this other component instead. So that introduces, I think, the New South Wales design system. And again, they're sort of saying, okay, so who should use it? You know, anyone who wants to make it consistent. And I think in this case, it comes with the Figma. It comes with React components. It does come with a Drupal implementation, which is their reference implementation. And there's a few other systems, including the Plone 6.1, which we created. So this is what it looks like in Volta. So that's the design system. So who are the users of a design system? If you think about something like material design system, the users of that design system are mostly developers, right? The components are all meant to be put into an application, and the end users who are using that end application don't really care about the design system. They just, they don't have to make decisions about it. They don't have to know about the guidance. So Pastanaga is another example of a design system that really is only used by developers, I think. Whereas something like the New South Wales digital design system is a little more complicated, because half of that guidance is about how users of the CMS are going to actually implement and put things on pages. And I think that's quite a big distinction. So our job, and that's what this is really about, is how do we implement a system that lets people do that in a way that doesn't violate the rules and the guidance and so on, and make that super easy. So really, in this case, developers are half the users of the design system, and so logos, footers, things like that are sort of kind of baked into the design, and then a whole bunch of other things are going to be things that the user picks, and that matches really well with the way Volta works with the components and so on. And you can see this is a whole lot of the components that the New South Wales design system comes from, and you can see there's a whole bunch of things that are going to be, things like dialogues are going to be developer picked, whereas cards and list items, maybe not list items, but banners, hero banners would be something that will be a CMS type component. So who are the users of a CMS? Well, I think CMS is a very interesting, weird software in that you kind of had two sets of users, right? You have editors, the people using the CMS to create content, and you have developers and integrators. Another way to think about it is really there is just one user, because we as an integrator, right, what we're doing is we are taking the tools that we have, which is Plone, we're taking the design system, and we are creating a new system, which is a custom system for our clients. Each client gets a custom system. I think Guido said this really nicely in his talk a little bit earlier. And there's the thing is that we definitely want to make it as easy to use for our users, but in doing so, that is also helping us, because we get less support requests, we get happier customers, we get repeat business, et cetera, et cetera. So in some ways, the integrators are maybe the real users. So what makes a good CMS for an integrator, right? So if in this example, again, I'm sort of talking about bring your own HTML, you want something that's quick to theme, that's cheap, because time is money. Even if you're charging the customers time and materials, you won't win the contract if the thing is very expensive to implement. easy to maintain, right? There's this hidden cost of upgrades and things like that if you want to bring in new features of Volto and stuff. Easy to use, less support like I talked about, and compliant, particularly for the government stuff, like WCAG and so on. So is Plone a good choice for a design system? So it really kind of, actually, when you think about it, I think we have three choices now. We have three kinds of Plone. Or if you count Nick and other things, maybe you've got more. But I'm going to talk about three different choices. And I'm going to look at it from these different perspectives. So Plone Classic. When I'm talking about Plone Classic here, I'm talking about Diazo, which I think is still the best solution if you're bringing your own HTML. I know not everyone did that, but we certainly did that, and that it was cheaper to build. I put it as, I put 2 ticks, so this is all like relative to each other. It's not, I'm not saying this is counts. I'm only comparing them against each other. So, okay, so Diazo, when you got your own HTML, was cheaper to build. It was slow to run. In particular, it was very easy to create rules that would be bad for performance. The upgrade cost, kind of medium. It was, it's very unlikely that the base HTML would change. And the editor UX, in comparison to, say, Volto, was much worse, right? I don't, anyway. So then you've got Plone Volto, right? So Plone Volto is, I think, a really good editing experience. Absolutely, there are plenty of UX things that can be improved and stuff, but the idea of true WYSIWYG, where you are editing straight in line and just like, I'm using content, using it to build our websites, like, it's so much quicker and easier to get content out. The build cost is not so good, and we're going to go into that, or at least for our case, where you're bringing your own HTML. And that's what the question mark means. It really does depend a little bit on your use case, and Volto was made to kind of be themed using CSS and the variables and so on like that. That's obviously going to be a lot cheaper. The upgrade costs also not so good, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And the speed is kind of medium. It could definitely be faster, partly because of the bundle size. Maybe we haven't learned how to cut out some of the stuff in the front end, but it brings a lot of the CMS in the initial page load, which is, what, a megabyte of JavaScript?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so then the third option, which is something we didn't really consider and probably should have, is a headless option, right? And by headless, what I'm saying is you would have a generic Volto editor. You would use that, and then you would build your front end as a completely separate thing. And the two things, you lose your WYSIWYG editing, but you've got two different implementations. So it means you can build the whole thing in Vue or Svelte or whatever you want as the Vue side, and you just use Volto as an editor with no customization, other than perhaps making sure you had the right sort of similar-ish components, right? Your card will work like a card in one way. So it's kind of it's still a medium build because you will have to make sure that you've got the right components and so on, and they'll have to work in the same way. Your upgrade cost is better because you're decoupled. Your page speed is going to be better because when you're rendering the site, you're only rendering exactly, you're not taking the CMS along with it. But your editor UX is definitely going to be a bit less. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit about some of the things that we built. So the first one is listing variations, one of the more simpler things. So they had a lot of cards. They had content blocks. There's even some we haven't implemented, like buttons and so on. And what we did was, we had variations. We used the variations system, and we can then show and hide different aspects of it, and we'll change all of the different ones in one go. This screenshot's a little bit wrong because it won't let you have multiple cards in the one block. I think I'll show that next. Okay, so we also implemented, it had sort of search results and so on, and there's all these things like we can put the data in, we can put the tags in, we can choose whether the image is shown, and so on. These are all sort of things that are said in the design system. It has to be there. So we use Elastic. We have been adding some things to the Elastic integration, like we now do the highlight snippets and stuff. I think that's a PR. Is it merged, John? Don't know? Okay, but there's a PR for that. And we will be adding some more things later. We had to do things like customizing the no results message. So this is an example of the batching with the cards and so on, and the settings along the side. Okay. So Jeff's going to talk a little bit about how that worked.
So I'll start off by saying the code on the screen is just an overview of what's going on. If you want the full code, you want to dive into yourselves, we'll have the link at the end of the talk. So anyway, variations, fields, that kind of thing, Volto's bread and butter. So here we've got an object in objects where the key ID is the ID for the block and the variation ID is nested within that. So in this example, we've got a listing block and the car listing is a variation here. So we're getting as you can see, can we mouse? No. Getting all the styling options that are available for cards and appending that to the schema for the listing. We then pass that down in the listing view to the children, so they're displayed to the cards that are in there. And then additionally at the end, we add the number of columns specifically for the card example. So that only appears for editors that are using the card listing, and that provides a nice seamless UX for them.
That's right. That was the bit I was supposed to say here, right? Some of these settings on the side, they only apply to certain variations. So this is about sort of hiding and showing different options for different variations, which is reasonably easy in Volto. So card grids. So not the best name we came up with, but this is the case of, okay, exactly the same cards, but we want the users to enter the stuff manually, right? It's no longer an automated listing based on a query. It's, should be entered directly in there. And we actually implement this a couple of times because we thought of a better way of doing it that enforced the rules. And so the first idea was worked a bit like this, which is we took the grid, which was not released, not in core at that point, but we took the grid, and then you have a card or a teaser, and then you place it in there. But the real problem with that is that what we had so many different variations and options, and if someone changed their mind about, it's like this looks a little bit better without the images, or it looks a bit, they would have to go through every single card and go and change the options for each one to see how it looks. That's not so nice. So then we changed the implementation. So our final idea was much more about the we had two things. We took the settings, the shared settings about those sort of what a variation for a card was, and we put it back into the grid. We overrode that and created our own sort of grid. And then when you ticked on those things, it would change all the cards at once. And then what we wanted to do was avoid the use of having a setting, having any kind of sidebar for each different item, because we thought that would be kind of confusing for the user. So then all the things that were specific to the card had to be inline edit WYSIWYG. And that was a little bit tricky. You've got things like links and so on. And the other thing we did is that, okay, so we want the user to be able to switch backwards and forwards and try different things. So if they turn off the images, then the images are still there in the JSON, and if they turn it back on again, they're still there. So that sort of solved the problem of allowing them to sort of switch styles. So in the end, actually, it works very similar to how the listing block works, which works the same way.
So as Dylan mentioned, we started work on this before the grid block was in core, so we based it on Volta grid block from Kit Concepts. It allows you to create a custom block type essentially and limit which blocks are available into it. So to get the card grid listing, we had a block which only let you insert cards. A similar story for one of our other grid styles, which is content blocks, I think it's called. Content blocks. So yeah, that block switching works by essentially abusing how Volto stores the type information for which block is there. We use the same schema enhancer that I mentioned earlier to add a field with an ID of that type, so that when you switch the value of this field, it essentially changes which block you're currently looking at. But the data for all of those blocks is still stored, and so it essentially just changes how it's displayed. So to remove the child block cyber editing, normally when you create a block in your edit view, you'd have a sidebar portal component. Within that, you'd have the block data form. So by stripping that out, you stop the sidebar displaying any of those settings, but the form continues to be focused on that side block, so you can make all the normal changes, keyboard shortcuts still work, but you're seeing the settings for the parent grid. But obviously without the sidebar, you then got to implement WYSIWYG for each of the options in there. So the title fields, it's got to be a single line, so we use the text line edit widget at that point. I think Victor had made PR 2 days prior to us working on this, so it was a bit buggy and took some time to implement, but got there in the end with it eventually. Description, it's a multi-line field, as you can see here, rich text editing, inserting links, that kind of thing. That's still implemented using Draft.js. It'd be great if somebody could change that to Slate. Link editing, again, it was a similar kind of story of things being inconsistent within Volto. We didn't have one easy, simple way to say, here's what a link should look like, pop up the link editing experience for it, and so we had to kind of roughly re-implement something. Again, PRs were started after that to solve that story.
As we had like the object browser, but then if you want to enter the thing manually, that's a Slate thing, right? And we didn't have that component to use. So.
Similar story for image uploading. We essentially copied the image block and how that works and changed a few things, but I think there's a PR in progress for unifying that story. And then the final bit of magic was just that whenever you change one of the settings in the parent to iterate through all the children and stick those settings onto it too. So when you change, for example, whether to show the highlight or the color of the card on the grid block, you pass that all down to all the children, it stores it, and then, yeah, works as normal.
Okay, so anyone who knows me knows that I have lots of opinions and lots of opinions about UX. So these are my opinions. There's nothing to do with the future of Volto, even though it says the future of Volto. This is like as I imagine it, maybe. So we've got a few of these slides. So one thing that kind of strikes me about this whole thing is that, that grid block, the card block thing where it's changing, it works really nicely. But why we got 2 implementations of the same thing? Why do we have listing blocks? And why do we have editable blocks? It should really be the same implementation. So what I think is that you can take the listing block and you can have manual blocks at the front of it. And the idea of a repeater block is actually to, instead of making variations on what goes in there, what if we could just pick a block and say we can split the properties between what should go into the sidebar, what's shared, and what is editable in the middle through some kind of configuration or something. So then if you've got, say, a third party, someone comes out with something that you want to repeat, it's a little bit of configuration to make it repeatable, and then suddenly, boom, it's in your listing and it's in your manual sort of grid type setup. So, you know, that could be, you know, cards and teasers and stuff, but it could be like tag clouds and could be buttons. You know, we actually don't have a good button solution at the moment. And some people do use buttons and things as sort of very much like teasers. And then you would have like, you'd have those shared settings. You know, whether you show the image, similar to what we saw before. You would have a layout, so you could say, okay, is it a grid with how many columns, or is it all in line buttons, or is it vertical like a search listing? You would have, I mean, this is the more controversial thing, whether you actually combine it into the same thing and say, you know, I've got an auto part and I want to drag these up and I want to have manual parts. Do you want to switch between auto and manual? I think my idea is that I think that it's not always clear to a lot of users how to use listings, and introducing it to them in a way that maybe they start with a kind of manual cards and then kind of go, oh, actually, you know, all these things that are manual, I can actually like fill this out, the rest of it, with something that's automatic. So it might be a gentler way to sort of let them know how that works. And then finally, like, we should have more sources for our automatic listings. It could be all sorts of things. You know, like we had a requirement the other day they wanted to bring LinkedIn feeds into Volto. So we would like to implement that in the listing so that, you know, you don't have to use their embedded thing. You can actually bring the content in and have it appear like news files, digital design system cards. So that's an idea. We would like to implement that. We may try. Okay, sections. Sections are another thing. So sections, obviously you know what sections are. They're like, you know, often the full page width kind of thing. Sometimes you want an image behind them. They have a whole bunch of different specifications on what you can and can't do with sections. And this was another tricky one to implement. And again, we tried it a couple of different times. Because it kind of feels like there should be something built into Volto to make sections easier. So our first attempt was a container block, like a section as a container. And the problem with this is that you don't want to have to users, like the default case is that they're just going to write down the page. They're just going to deal with that. And it's like, okay, so they don't have to deal with, shouldn't have to deal with like moving things in and out of containers and knowing that there's a section there. It should just be, you know, default section, not worry about it. And of course, the drag and drop story in and out of containers is not really there. And we really wanted it so that, like, again, so you could switch variations and stuff. You can say, okay, I want to easily sort of say, look, see what this looks like in a different sort of color or as a different kind of section. So our second idea was, which we didn't implement, was section breaks, where it's like, okay, what if we have like a thing in between that you just insert and says this is a section break, and from now on you're in a next section. So the problem with this is it kind of breaks the WYSIWYG idea, right? Like you've got something that shouldn't be taking up any space, that's invisible, and is also quite thin, you know, and hard to click on, that's containing your information about what a section is. So what we ended up with is we used variations on all the blocks. So we said, okay, so if you've got a paragraph, by default it's just going to be like follow the last paragraph. And every time you want to change a section, you'll go into a block and say, okay, this is now a new section of one of these kinds. And then we did a little bit of magic in the background to put this inside divs and wrap it and so on. So it did help with that sort of no effort default use case. It's not that WYSIWYG, right? Because it's supposed to be full width, but you know, in this case, there is no full width. There's no representation of how that section is going to work on the screen, and that's not great. And possibly it's not the most obvious place to look for how do I create a new section. And also, all blocks need this variation to work. So how did this get implemented?
So yeah, as Dylan said, this works essentially by adding an additional field set with a bunch of data to each block. So at the end of our new software as add-on, we iterate through all of the blocks we've got and add another schema enhancer for adding sections to it. We shadow the default view component, which is essentially what normally would render your blocks. It does mean we have some re-implementation to do. For example, if you want to add some block support to an event view, you've got to reshadow that one as well, but we wanted to really ensure we could use blocks for whatever we want later. So before rendering, we group the blocks based on a number of rules. For example, if we go through every block and we don't find any sections, then don't do any grouping, proceed to normal rendering. If we're just about to start a new section, it's a title block or a slate block with headings applied to it, then we start a new section for that one. As Dylan said, we have this same as previous option, so we can continue to just build upon the previous section without users having to think about it. And then we also had other concepts such as full width blocks like the hero, which don't need to be wrapped in a section, and content blocks such as your slate block, images, that kind of thing. We also, if we were using sections, we had some other small changes to the page, such as we had to remove some spacing from the top and the bottom because it's already accounted for in the section implementation.
Okay, so again, my opinion, well, this one's a little bit, this is very much tenuous. I still don't know how to solve this well in Volto, so if anyone has any ideas. But I think like better containers, so if you have the container and container story kind of working well, and you've got the drag and drop working between the containers and cut and paste and so on, that would make it definitely possible. But I think you also, what you'd need is, so then you've got your page, your section block, and then your blocks inside that. And then inside that, again, you've got things like column blocks and so on. So you kind of, the problem there is then you're going up and down this kind of containment hierarchy and so on, which is maybe not that intuitive. You have to know to go up in order to set the section headings, set section settings. And if you create a, like, let's say you've kind of created a whole page of content and you want to go like this bit here, that should be in a separate section. What you want to do, I think what would be nice is if you had a split after command. So let's say you're in the middle of a page, you can say split the section here, then you can go in and change the settings for the next part, split it again. Maybe you also need a merge. Maybe that might be a nice solution. Okay, guidance. So the thing that I talked about before is that guidance is what you can, there's only so much you can do, right? Like we've done things like by design, like with the way the car grids work, right? There's a rule that says all the car grids in a row or in a module, whatever they say, have to be all the same type, right? So we enforce that via the CMS by design. And that's great. And as much as possible, we try to do that. But there's other times where it's like you can't do that. So what we did is we implemented an advice system that looked at the content and looked at the arrangement of the blocks and things like that, and popped up little messages to help the user. Just going to talk about that.
Yeah, so we are still kind of experimenting with this, so we kept it simple and easy to work on. We essentially define a bunch of regex and rule mappings and pass in various fields from the data to that. So for example, if there's a new line and you're on the card block, then it will display the warning message. If you've got a paragraph tag and you're in the description, then maybe you want to be using the content block instead, and so it will recommend these things to you. It'd be nice if we could make these a bit more configurable in Volto, maybe even through the web later. It'd be, yeah, who knows.
So yeah, my future idea, trademark is that we make it configurable through the web. I think what would be nice if you extended the concept of content rules. At the moment, we have this idea of content rules, and they act only after save on the whole content. What if you had a mid-edit content rule, right? That said, if you're in the middle of editing and these conditions exist about where the blocks are or regular expressions and so on, then show this warning to help guide the users on creating that. And the really nice thing about that is that, you can implement these things from the design system, but an organization may evolve and grow and have their own rules and their own things that they want to add as well, or they want to hide rules and say, oh, this is no longer relevant, this is just annoying. So I think that could work. Yeah. That's basically that idea. So the next idea, slots light. This is the one we were working on last, I think. So we can't call it slots because slots is still coming, I guess. I don't know. But what we needed was an editable footer. And I was like, we started out just creating a footer editing block. And then we realized, well, actually we can extend this a little bit. So what it does is it takes a, we want it for these different things. Like we also want it for global alerts and some other things. So you define a slot in the Volto config. And so that's done by the designer at implementation time. They give a name and description to a slot. Then you insert a little bit of code at the right place of where it's going to appear. The control panel then appears that lets you put in blocks. Right, we haven't got a plugin for this. We'd like to, we will. So here's an example, right? So it looks a little bit weird because that's the control panel, that's the actual footer, and arguably the header and footer shouldn't be in the editing control panel experience. The future for this is someone implements slots properly. It would be nice if we could inline edit this, right? So you can just switch between, I'm editing the footer on this page, I'm editing the content on this page, I'm editing the, alert or something like that. I think we discussed it. I think it's possible. Okay, forms. I'm going to rush through this a little bit. I mean, the forms was a little bit hard, right? Like, we had a few different options. We've done a lot of Plone stuff. We could have made Plone easier and upgraded that. That's a big job. We could have upgraded EasyForm. It's a shame that there is no EasyForm upgrade path because it's quite powerful. So in the end, we used Volto Form Block. Which is nice and it works. We didn't quite realize how many things are missing from it and how many of those things our customers actually wanted. So I think we've got 9 PRs and counting for extra features we've added to it. So here's a few of them. So acknowledgement emails, like a kind of a thank you thing. Our particular customer needed XML because it goes through the case management system. So XML data in the email. Some different formatting options to display the values in tables instead of as a bullet list or something. The metadata stuff that's in EasyForm, like time and IP address and stuff like that. Conditional field rendering, which is not in EasyForm, but basically it will hide a field or show a field if you pick a different option in a previous thing. This internal value so that you can rename things. So in particular, you can say instead of a yes/no field, you can have yes, I agree, and no, I don't, and it keeps the same internal value so that your data doesn't get mucked up. Hidden fields, validation rules, we're working on that. Yeah, so future Volto, it's like maybe we should have just upgraded EasyForm. So we also did a bunch of stuff with kind of like this themes when we built a color picker and so on, and did logos and stuff like that. Okay, so upgrades, I think this goes back to what I was saying originally about the cost, right? So how many shadows do? We did 16 theme. Maybe you should talk about this one.
Yeah, so there's the 16 theme components, the usual header, footer, logo, that kind of thing. We also had 25 magic components. Pretty much every block that was in Volto, we needed to adjust the HTML for to meet the needs of the design system. And then on top of that, all the blocks that weren't in Volto, similar story.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the key thing is that you have to, in order to get your HTML in there, you have to shadow. There's no question. That's the only option for there. There's no sort of separation between functionality of a component versus the theme of a component or the HTML of a component, because of the way React works. So we have to track the news files, digital, their upgrades. They will upgrade it, and we will then have to take that HTML and re-put it into Volto, which is, you said it's not too bad, right?
It depends on the feature, but yeah, it's not too bad.
Okay. We are going to, like, they've changed the way the search works, so we're going to have to redo that. And yeah, the big kind of cost here is that, like, every time Volto upgrades, we have to go and do these diffs and work out what they've added, whether we want to bring it into Shadow or not, right? So I think you said 1 day, but that doesn't include testing. You've got to make sure you haven't broken anything and so on. So, and plus the add-ons, that doesn't include add-ons. So one thing we definitely learned is that there's more moving parts, right? You've got a front-end containers, and we've discovered a bunch of bugs along the way. I fixed a bug in Waitress the other day that was incredibly obscure, that has never been found before, because it was going to 100% CPU, and actually that's nothing to do with Volta, is it? We would have got that anyway if we'd gone to Plone 6. But we've discovered different bugs like that along the way, and it's cost us more than we thought. Redirects being broken, we've got some PRs for that, right? Redirects are broken only if you do VHM in a different way. That's why no one else has fixed it before this. The multi-tenanted thing. So, you know, we do have another system where we've got this file sharing collaboration suite, and we want to run multiple sites. And currently, you can't run the same Volto front end with the same theme for many sites. Seamless mode doesn't work like that yet, but we have a PR that we're working on. More scalable. So we ran the numbers yesterday. I was like, it didn't work out. Like when we converted these sites from what was Plone 5 to Volto, it's like it should be less, and the numbers we ran kind of came out the same. So I don't know. I think maybe we're using less memory overall, which is good, but I think if you count the total request time for each different you know, there's this kind of measure of how much CPU is used for the site. It sort of came out the same, but I think we need to redo that, so I'm not sure. So, to summarize, the UX is definitely better. The UX is going to get even better, I think, as some of these bugs and as Quanta comes along. It is expensive if you bring your own HTML. I think one thing I haven't talked about yet is that one of the big differences is that when you want to do some custom stuff, like it's React, man. It is much easier to get much better UI, much quicker, and that saves you a lot. And React developers cost less as well. From a business point of view, you know, you don't have to train people on, you know, dexterity and all the ways of implementing classic stuff. So I think in hindsight, exploring the headless option might have been good. I don't know. We didn't try it, so you know, my little measurements here of what it might have been like, that's purely speculative. There are obviously some costs. I mean, you have to, you still got to build a front end, right, with the routing and all the rest of it. But other people have done it, right? I didn't mention before, like Plone Gatsby is, you know, a good example of using Volto and a headless, you know, in a headless type arrangement. And this is the thing, I think the UX doesn't have to be too bad, right? This is an example of Story Block, which is a headless CMS, and they advertise themselves as an inline editing WYSIWYG, and what they're doing, I think, is kind of clever. So you notice this looks a lot like Volto, right? What this bit in the middle is a completely different architecture. It can be built in whatever, and all you're doing is adding a tiny little bit of JavaScript that allows the selection of the blocks to happen, right? So you can't edit inline, right? These components in the middle, they won't change. But if you edit on that side, save it, this will reload in the iframe and reselect the same block, and you get half the editing experience. It's not as good, but it's not bad. I think that's it. Thank you. Questions?
Questions? Come on.
Too much, everyone's shell-shocked. While you think of a question, I'm gonna show you my socks. These are the coolest swag that I've ever got from a conference. These are Python socks. They were given to the organizing team at PyCon.
Which version of Python? Left, right version, right version? 3.12? So, yeah, yes, Dylan, so what you presented is very cool. I mean, you're showing the whole the whole frustration when theory comes to practice and you really need to build and implement a design system. And I mean, we've had our quarrels in GitHub and in meetings this year where you see that the Plone integrator is trying to actually use Volto for larger sites with design systems, and then you really run into this challenge of having, it's not only, oh, we have a nice block editor and we'll just throw some nice block variations in them, but as soon as those blocks start to integrate and you want to work with them together, then you run into these really difficult challenges where you want to make things simple for an editor, have a developer experience right for the developers, for the themers, and the combinations explode exponentially. And I think what we see here, so it's a really great effort, it's really a good explanation and an implementation, but we're not there yet. I mean, if you look at Plone, how Plone got before Plone 6, the efforts we tried, the landing page or the composite page editors that we've had, Philip and I did we regretted it as soon as we started planning for it, the TPN issue last year of composite page editor things. We're only at the beginning, I think, of finding a solution here. So thank you so much for trying this also for a government and then hitting the issues, coming back with issues. But this is something we need to discuss this so much more. We need to have more implementation, see where we bump our heads, and if we can come up with something, because I think this is one of the most complex things that we'll have to solve in the next 1 to 2 years, bringing Volto further forward, looking at different implementations. I mean, KitConcept has Volto Light team, ODWeb has set up an ecosystem of blocks that work together, that has another group. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize a little bit that it may have been a little bit negative, and I really want to emphasize this is about bringing your own HTML, which is a unique case that a lot of people don't necessarily have, right? If you are theming Volto using semantic and everything like that, I guarantee you that is a very different experience than bringing your own HTML.
Yep. Like awesome work that you guys did, and for sure we're waiting for those pull requests to come. And actually 2 comments. I had the same problem in a website that I did with the sections, and we've solved it with the section divider, which we made it like really, really obvious. And we said, in the section divider, we said everything about this line acts like this, everything below this line acts like this. Okay, so it's a variation. But I really like the idea of having the block component template, block UI, so really, really dump component separately, and then maybe you can even take that and use it in a headless CMS type of scenario. So that even though we completely separate the HTML production of that block from its management interface and so on, so that we can continue to use Volto, but allow rendering the block, to just override it or reuse it in the headless CMS scenario.
I think if anyone didn't see my lightning talk yesterday, I go into that, there is this whole Mac architecture thing where they're proposing this and all the things about headless CMS. And these are different cases, right? Like if you want less of a theme, if you're not bringing your own HTML, headless is one case that's good for, it has pros and cons, right? But I do think that we could create something like this with Volto that, you can have 2 modes of Volto, right? Without changing Volto terribly much, right? That's definitely possible. And then you could, yeah, then we would have a true headless CMS or an editing environment that had side-by-side preview, essentially, as well as the other way of doing Volto, which is true inline WYSIWYG.
And another comment about slots. Yeah, I really like for both slots to be finally finished, except that we like bogged down into the UX talks and experience, and kind of still waiting for that Quanta toolbars to happen, just so that we finally have, you know, the building blocks to make that vision happen.
Yeah.
Maybe we change the vision. Maybe we simplify the whole thing. Yeah.
So definitely, I think that the toolbar thing is now just like it's like this stopping block to all these other things, right?
Yeah.
And in discussion with Victor, he said like essentially there's no way to do it with the current API. You have to kind of break the API, so it's going to be further down the track. We've been working on our way to see if we can do it without doing that. So we've been playing around with that, and Jeff's
Progress.
I can't definitively say we can do it. We are trying to do it because we need it. It's the right solution for so many things. So, yeah.
And another, I think Victor has a proof of concept PR, which was actually pretty advanced about making possible drag and drop between containers. And so, yeah.
I can put my shoes back on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.